Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like your own mind was working against you? Like no matter how much you try to stay calm, stay focused, stay present, your thoughts just won't listen. You smile on the outside, but inside it's chaos. You're exhausted, not because of what's happening around you, but because of what's happening within you. Let me tell you, you're not alone, but you are more powerful than you think. Because there is one truth, one unshakable truth that will change your life the moment you choose to believe it. You must control your mind, or it will control you. We live in a world that's constantly pulling us in 1,000 directions. Notifications, opinions, comparisons, fear, pressure. It's everywhere. The noise is loud and it's relentless. And most people, they spend their entire lives reacting to that noise. They wake up and let the world decide how they feel. They go to sleep carrying everyone else's energy. They move through life without ever taking hold of the one thing they actually can control, their mind. But let me tell you something from deep personal truth. The greatest battles you will ever face in this life won't be out there. They'll be in here. Not in the traffic, not in the job, not in the relationship, but in the stories you tell yourself, in the thoughts you repeat, in the patterns you let lead your life. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. Because when you finally decide to stop being a prisoner to your thoughts, when you finally choose to lead your mind instead of being led by it, that's when you begin to live, truly live, with clarity, purpose, and peace. So today, I'm not here to motivate you. I'm here to remind you of what you already know deep down. You are the gatekeeper of your mind. You are the author of your mental world. And the moment you take back that power, everything changes. Let's begin. Your mind is your most powerful tool. It shapes your reality. Everything begins in the mind. Before a word is spoken, before an action is taken, before a dream is fulfilled or a mistake is made, it begins as a thought. The mind is not just where thoughts are born. It's where they are nurtured, shaped, and eventually turned into reality. This is why your mind is your most powerful tool. It can build worlds or tear them down. It can lift you to the highest version of yourself or drag you into places so dark you forget the light was ever there. It is both your architect and your executioner, depending on how you treat it. Let's be real for a moment. Most of us were never taught how to manage our minds. We were taught math, science, language, and maybe even how to throw a ball. But no one handed us a guidebook for how to navigate the storms in our heads. So we improvise. We absorb messages from our environment. We inherit beliefs from parents, teachers, television, and society. Some of those beliefs empower us, but many of them don't. Many of them are rooted in fear, limitation, and scarcity. And if we never question them, if we never take the wheel of our own mental ship, we end up living lives based on programming that was never ours to begin with. The truth is, the mind is not something you should simply let run wild. Left to its own devices, the mind often gravitates toward danger and survival. That's not because you're broken. It's evolutionary. Your brain is wired to keep you safe, not happy. It looks for threats. It assumes the worst. It rehearses failures before they even happen. But happiness, success, love, these are not survival instincts. These are cultivated experiences, and they require intention. They require mastery. And that mastery begins when you realize you are not your mind. you are its keeper. Imagine this: you're holding a chisel and standing in front of a block of marble. That marble is your life. Your mind is the chisel. Every thought you think, every belief you reinforce, every story you tell yourself, it all chips away at that block. Eventually, something will emerge. The question is, will it be a masterpiece you are proud of, or a distorted figure shaped by fear and passivity? You are the sculptor. You get to choose. The way you think influences everything: your career, your health, your relationships. Let's say two people apply for the same job. One walks in thinking, "I'm not good enough. They'll never hire me." The other walks in believing, "I'm valuable. I bring something unique to this team." Who do you think leaves a better impression? Not just on the employer, but on themselves? The difference isn't always in the RA it's in the mindset. The same goes for relationships. If you believe you're unlovable, you might push people away before they get close. Not because they don't care, but because your mind won't allow you to receive love you don't believe you deserve. Here's something you must understand. What you believe becomes your truth, and not because it's objectively real, but because your mind will go out of its way to prove it right. If you believe people can't be trusted, you will focus on every betrayal and overlook every kindness. If you believe life is full of opportunity, you will find doors where others see walls. Your mind filters reality to match your dominant thoughts. That's not magic, it's neurology. It's your reticular activating system. It's cognitive bias. But more than anything, it's your power. You don't have to accept every default setting you were given. You can rewire, reframe, and redesign your mental world. That takes practice. You don't become the master of your mind overnight, but you start by paying attention, by asking, is this thought serving me, or is it limiting me? By noticing your inner dialogue, how you speak to yourself when you win and how you speak to yourself when you fail. Do you offer grace or judgment, encouragement or shame? Because the relationship you have with your mind is the foundation for every other relationship you'll ever have. You must also become the guardian of what enters your mental space. Just as you wouldn't let toxic chemicals into your body without consequence, you cannot allow toxic thoughts, media, or people into your mind without it taking a toll. This doesn't mean you live in a bubble. It means you live with boundaries. You protect your peace. You become intentional about what you read, watch, and engage in. Because every input shapes the lens through which you see the world and yourself. Some people say, well, I can't help what I think. But you can help what you repeat. You can help what you give energy to. Thoughts may arise uninvited, but you don't have to entertain them. You don't have to build them a house and feed them dinner. You can watch a thought come and then let it pass. And if it keeps coming back, you can challenge it. Ask for proof. Replace it with a more empowering belief. Over time, this becomes second nature. You stop being a prisoner of your mind, and you become its leader. Let's talk about fear, because nothing hijacks the mind faster. Fear is loud. It's dramatic. It paints worst-case scenarios and then convinces you they're inevitable. But fear is rarely truth. It's a story, a projection. And if you don't control your mind, that story becomes your reality. You avoid the risks, the growth, the conversations that could change everything, because fear told you not to try. But when you take the reins of your mind, you don't silence fear, you outvoice it. You turn up the volume on faith, wisdom, and courage. You remind yourself of every mountain you've already climbed, and you trust that even if you fall, you'll rise again. One of the greatest freedoms in life is learning that you can choose your thoughts. Not always instantly, not always easily, but with awareness and effort, you can. And that choice is the seed of power. Because once you realize that you are not at the mercy of your mind, but the manager of it, you become unstoppable. You can sit in chaos and create calm. You can face failure and still believe in your future. You can walk through darkness and still choose to look for the stars. Your external world may not always be in your control, but your internal world is your kingdom. It's the one place where you have the final say. Guard it, honor it, shape it. Because the moment you start controlling your mind is the moment you begin to shape your life on purpose. And there is no greater power than that. Thoughts create emotions, and emotions drive actions. Let's break it down in a way that's both personal and practical, because this concept can change your life the moment you truly understand it. Every single action you've ever taken or avoided taking was born from a feeling. And that feeling came from a thought. That's the chain reaction. Thoughts lead to emotions, and emotions lead to actions. If you want to understand why your life looks the way it does, start tracing it back to the way you think. Picture this. You're about to walk into a room full of strangers. One person might think, what if they judge me? That thought sparks anxiety, which might cause them to shrink back, avoid eye contact, or never speak up at all. Another person walks into that same room thinking, this is a great opportunity to meet someone new. That thought produces curiosity, maybe even excitement, and they move with ease, confidence, and openness. Same environment, completely different outcomes. Why? Because the root thought planted a different emotional seed. What we often overlook is just how much power we give to our emotions, especially when they're left unchecked. Emotions feel automatic, like something that just happens to us. But they don't appear out of nowhere. They are driven by the narrative we're telling ourselves, often without even realizing it. And if we're not aware of those narratives, those thoughts, we become puppets to emotional patterns that can sabotage us. Think about how much of our behavior is emotionally driven: eating when we're stressed, lashing out when we're hurt, procrastinating when we feel overwhelmed. We know better. But when emotion takes the wheel, logic often takes the back seat. So the question is, how do we get back in control? It starts with learning to listen to our thoughts like we would listen to a friend. Are they helpful? Are they grounded in reality? Are they kind? Because if your inner voice is constantly harsh, doubtful, or critical, it will flood your emotional system with tension and fear. And that state will influence how you speak, act, and show up. The real work is not in fighting emotions, but in understanding the thoughts that cause them. And let's be clear, emotions aren't bad. They're essential. They're the color in our lives. But they are meant to inform us, not control us. A healthy emotional life comes from healthy thinking. If you constantly feed your mind negative input, whether it's news, comparison on social media, or even just self-defeating internal monologues, your emotional state will reflect that. But if you start to input strength, gratitude, possibility, and peace, your emotions begin to respond in kind. One powerful practice is the pause. That moment between thought and reaction is where freedom lives. When a negative emotion rises up, don't rush to respond. Pause. Ask yourself, what am I thinking right now that's making me feel this way? That one question creates space. And in that space, you have choice. You can choose to challenge the thought. You can choose to reframe it. You can choose to think something different, something empowering, something grounded in truth. Here's the gold. Once you begin shifting your thoughts, your emotions will follow. You'll begin to notice a change, not because life got easier, but because your interpretation of life got wiser. And from that emotional stability, your actions change. You stop reacting out of fear and start acting out of vision. You stop letting temporary feelings dictate permanent decisions. You lead your life with intention, not impulse. So if you want to change your life, if you want better habits, stronger relationships, more peace, the place to begin is with your thoughts. Because your thoughts will stir your emotions, and those emotions will drive your choices. And your choices, they write the story of your life. One of the most liberating truths you'll ever come to understand is this: you are not your thoughts. Let that settle in. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears the voice. Now, that might sound like philosophy, but it's actually neuroscience, psychology, and deep wisdom rolled into one. Because your mind is a thought-producing machine. It runs all day, whether you want it to or not. Sometimes the thoughts are helpful. Sometimes they're mean. Sometimes they're completely random and have nothing to do with who you are. But here's the key. Just because a thought appears doesn't make it true. And it definitely doesn't make it you. Most people live under the illusion that every thought they have must be accepted. If the thought says, "I'm not good enough," they believe it. If the thought says, "This will never work," they retreat. If the thought says, "They don't like me," they adjust who they are. But the truth is, you don't have to buy into everything your mind tells you. You can observe your thoughts the same way you watch clouds pass in the sky. Some are light and fleeting. Some are dark and heavy, but they're all temporary. You are the sky, not the clouds. Learning to observe your thoughts is a practice in awareness. It means stepping outside the constant stream of mental noise and asking, what am I thinking right now? Where is this thought coming from? Is this thought based on fear, habit, or truth? That pause, just like we talked about before, gives you perspective. It reminds you that your mind is a tool, not your identity. This is where meditation, mindfulness, or even quiet reflection can become powerful tools. When you sit in stillness, you begin to notice how much chatter your mind generates. You might hear a loop of worries, self-criticism, or daydreams. And in that noticing, you create space between you and the thought. That space is where healing happens. That space is where freedom begins. Sometimes we confuse our thoughts with reality, but a thought is just a mental event. It's a sentence your brain fires off. You don't have to act on it. You don't even have to keep it. You can challenge it, reframe it, or let it go. For example, if you catch yourself thinking, "I'm a failure," pause. Ask yourself, is that really true? Or am I just experiencing a temporary setback? If someone I loved had this thought, what would I say to them? This approach invites compassion. It invites clarity. The power comes in recognizing you have a choice. You can choose not to believe every negative thought that pops into your head. You can choose to redirect your attention. You can literally rewire your brain through repetition and intentionality. That's called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change based on what you focus on. When you repeatedly interrupt harmful thought patterns and replace them with more empowering ones, you create new neural pathways. Over time, these new paths become stronger and more automatic. You are literally sculpting your mind into something stronger, calmer, and more aligned with who you want to be. This is not about denial or toxic positivity. It's not pretending bad things don't happen or that pain isn't real. It's about refusing to let pain become your identity. It's about choosing to respond to challenges with strength instead of surrender. When you observe a negative thought and choose not to accept it as truth, you take back your power. You stop being a passenger in your life and start becoming the driver. And remember, even the most successful, peaceful, seemingly together people deal with unhelpful thoughts. The difference is they don't believe all of them. They don't let those thoughts steer the ship. They know that self-awareness is not a one-time event. It's a daily discipline, a mental hygiene. Just like brushing your teeth, you have to clean up your mind. Observe the thoughts that show up and choose what stays. You are not the fear. You are not the anxiety. You are not the judgment or the insecurity. You are the awareness that notices those things. And the more you practice stepping into that awareness, the less control those thoughts have over you. So the next time your mind throws a negative, limiting, or anxious thought your way, and it will, pause, breathe, remind yourself, this is just a thought. I am not this thought. I can choose another one. That's where your power lies. Discipline over the mind leads to clarity, focus, and peace. Let's be honest. Discipline isn't a glamorous word. It sounds strict, rigid, maybe even cold. But in reality, when applied to the mind, discipline becomes one of the most loving things you can offer yourself. Because mental discipline is not about control in the sense of suppression. It's about direction. It's about deciding where your attention goes, what thoughts you allow to take root, and how you respond to the chaos that the world and your own brain can throw at you. Think of your mind like a garden. Without attention, weeds grow. The seeds of fear, comparison, procrastination, and anxiety are blown in from every direction. Social media, negative conversations, childhood patterns. If you don't take responsibility for what grows in your mental soil, something else will. And it won't be the calm, clear, focused mindset you need to build the life you want. Now, discipline doesn't mean perfection. It means consistency. It means creating habits that strengthen your ability to think clearly under pressure, to return to your values when life gets loud, and to act with intention rather than impulse. It's the muscle that allows you to say, no, I'm not going to spiral into that thought again today. It's what lets you notice when your focus starts to slip and gently, firmly bring it back over and over again. Discipline of the mind is what builds resilience, because life is going to test you. That's guaranteed. People will disappoint you. Goals will take longer than expected. Setbacks will sting. And in those moments, it's your mental habits that determine whether you spiral into panic or respond with calm. A disciplined mind says, this is hard, but I can handle it. I've faced worse. I will find a way. An undisciplined mind says, this always happens to me. I can't deal. I give up. The difference, not in circumstance, in mental conditioning. But here's the beauty of it. You don't need to be born with a disciplined mind. You build it. One moment, one thought, one choice at a time. And you start with small practices that teach your mind who's in charge. Wake up and choose to focus your first thoughts on gratitude instead of stress. That's mental discipline. Resist the urge to pick up your phone and scroll when your brain wants a dopamine hit. That's mental discipline. Catch yourself when your mind drifts into judgment or comparison and pull it back. That's mental discipline. Over time, these small acts accumulate into mental strength, and with that strength comes clarity, because when your mind isn't clouded by constant reactivity, you can actually see what matters. Focus follows discipline. It's hard to focus when your mind is cluttered with every worry, every distraction, every reactive emotion. But when you train your brain to return to center, to breathe, to slow down, to stay present, you can direct your energy toward what truly deserves it. Whether it's a creative project, a business goal, or a difficult conversation, focus allows you to be fully there. Not just physically, but mentally. That's where your real power lies. And finally, let's talk about peace, because in a world that glorifies hustle and chaos, peace is a rebellious act. It's easy to think that peace comes from your circumstances being calm, the right job, the right partner, the right bank account. But real peace is internal. It's the ability to sit with yourself and not be at war in your own head. It's the calm that comes from knowing. No matter what's happening out there, I've got a steady place inside. You don't get that kind of peace by accident. You cultivate it through discipline, through choosing not to feed every fearful thought, through training your mind to return to what's real, what's present, and what's true. Mental discipline isn't about shutting your emotions down. It's about learning how to ride the waves of life without drowning in them. It's about responding, not reacting. It's about making choices that are aligned with your highest self, not your loudest fear. And it's about doing that consistently, even when it's hard, even when no one's watching. Because here's the truth, a disciplined mind is a free mind, free from the tyranny of impulse, free from the noise of anxiety, free to create, to love, to lead, to live. And that kind of freedom, that's peace. You can train your mind just like a muscle. Think of your mind like any other part of your body. If you want strong arms, you lift weights. If you want endurance, you run. And if you want a calm, focused, resilient mind, you train it. It doesn't just happen because you wish for it. It happens because you build it, rep after rep, day after day. Mental training is the practice of choosing your thoughts instead of being ruled by them. It's sitting down each morning to set your intentions. It's catching yourself when your inner critic gets loud and replacing that voice with one of truth and strength. It's pausing before you speak when you're angry. It's staying grounded in what you know, even when emotions try to pull you into chaos. Just like with the body, progress takes time. You won't feel stronger after one meditation or one journal entry. But over weeks and months, you'll notice the shift. Fewer emotional spirals, more clarity, more grace under pressure. That's your training paying off. You don't need to control every thought. You just need to practice choosing better ones more often. That's mental fitness. And just like the gym, the more you show up, the stronger you become. External circumstances can't control a disciplined mind. There's a moment in life, and maybe it hits you in the middle of chaos or after a great disappointment, when you realize you can't control everything that happens around you. The world will swirl. People will leave. Things will break. Life will push and pull you in directions you didn't see coming. But inside that storm, there is a place no one else can touch. That place is your mind. And when you learn how to discipline it, truly discipline it, you become unshakable. Not because the world becomes gentle, but because you've become strong. A disciplined mind is like a captain in rough waters. The waves don't stop, but the captain doesn't panic. They adjust the sails, they read the wind. They respond without losing their center. That's what it means to lead yourself. That's what it means to say, yes, this is hard, but I get to decide how I think about it. We've been taught to believe that peace, focus, and happiness are outcomes of the right conditions. That if we just had the right job, the right partner, the right number in our bank account, then we'd finally feel safe. But that kind of stability is a mirage, because life is always changing. The only true security comes from within, and you build it by training your mind to stay grounded even when the ground itself is shaking. Think about how often people let their environment determine their mood. A traffic jam ruins their day. One rude comment sends them into self-doubt. A missed opportunity convinces them they'll never succeed. That's not living. That's reacting. That's surrendering your power to the external. But the truth is, the most important battles are won internally. You win them when you choose to stay calm, even when everything around you is not. You win them when you choose your response instead of handing it over to your circumstances. Let's be clear, this isn't about pretending life is always okay. It's not about fake positivity. It's about standing in your truth with eyes wide open and still choosing how you will move forward. It's the quiet discipline of asking, what is in my control right now? My breath, my attitude, my next thought. And then owning that over and over again. This level of mental discipline doesn't happen overnight. It's a practice. It starts with catching yourself in the moment when you feel triggered, overwhelmed, reactive, and pausing. Just pausing, noticing the space between the stimulus and your response. That space is where freedom lives. That space is where you train your mind not to hand over control to everything that's loud and temporary. There are people who live in chaos but still carry peace. There are people who've lost everything yet walk with strength. How? Not because they're superhuman, but because they've trained their minds to lead their lives, not be led by fear, anger, or pain. They've learned that emotions are real, but they're not always reliable guides, and circumstances are real, but they're not the full story. And when your mind is disciplined, you're not so easily swayed. You don't give your energy to every distraction or let every problem dictate your mood. You choose what to focus on. You choose how to talk to yourself. You choose your next step. That's power. That's maturity. That's freedom. Imagine waking up in the middle of a storm, personal, professional, emotional. And instead of spiraling, you breathe, center yourself, and say, I've been here before. I can handle this. That is the power of a trained, disciplined mind. That is the voice of someone who's done the inner work. It's not always about changing your situation. Sometimes it's about changing how your mind sees it. Sometimes the growth isn't in the solution, but in your response to the problem. That kind of strength doesn't come from outside, it's built from within. So yes, the world will try to test you, and sometimes it will succeed. But if you continue to strengthen your mind, you'll realize that while you can't control the waves, you can learn how to surf. You'll realize that your peace doesn't have to wait for your life to be perfect. It can begin the moment you decide to lead your thoughts instead of following them blindly. External circumstances don't control a disciplined mind. And once you embody that truth, you become the kind of person who can walk through fire and come out stronger, not burned. Not because life got easier, but because you got wiser. A scattered mind is easily manipulated. When your mind is unfocused, constantly distracted, and pulled in every direction, it becomes vulnerable, not just to confusion, but to influence. In that scattered state, you're more likely to believe every fear-filled headline, follow the loudest voice in the room, or react emotionally to things that don't deserve your energy. Why? Because without focus, your attention is up for grabs, and the world is full of people, algorithms, and agendas ready to take it. But when your mind is centered, when you know how to pause and think critically, you don't get swayed so easily. You start asking better questions. You stop following noise and start following truth. Discipline brings clarity, and clarity is your protection. So guard your attention like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Stillness of mind is a superpower in a noisy world. We live in a time where everything is loud, notifications, opinions, expectations, pressure. The world constantly demands your attention, your reaction, your energy. But in the middle of all that noise, there is something rare, something powerful, something revolutionary: stillness. A quiet, steady mind is not just peaceful, it's powerful. Stillness is not about doing nothing, it's about doing everything from a grounded place. It's the ability to hear your own thoughts clearly when everyone else is shouting. It's the strength to stay present in the moment rather than being pulled by every impulse. In stillness, you don't just react, you reflect. You move with purpose, not panic. And that kind of clarity, it's magnetic. People are drawn to it. Opportunities are attracted to it. In a world where most people are running in every direction, the person who can remain calm, clear, and centered stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. Stillness doesn't mean absence of thought. It means mastery over thought. It means knowing how to return to your breath, your body, your truth, no matter how loud the world gets. And once you know how to access that still place inside, no one can take it from you. One of the most powerful truths you can ever internalize is this: you always have a choice in how you respond. Not everything that happens to you is your fault, but how you react to it. That's your responsibility. Between what happens and what you do about it, there's a pause, and in that pause is your power. Most people live in reaction mode. Someone criticizes them and they snap back. Plans change and they spiral into stress. A comment online offends them and they take the bait. But emotional maturity, real self-mastery, is found in the space between the trigger and the response. That's where you stop being a victim of circumstance and become the author of your actions. That pause is where you get to ask, what matters right now? Is this reaction serving me? Am I about to regret this? And when you practice that kind of presence, you start to respond with clarity instead of chaos. You respond from your values, not your ego. The pause doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Because while anyone can react, it takes strength to stay still, breathe, and choose your next move with intention. And that choice, repeated over time, becomes your peace, your character, your life. Mind control is self-respect. It shows you value your energy and time. There's a kind of quiet dignity that comes with being in control of your mind. Not just occasionally, but consistently. Not in the performative way people often associate with self-discipline, where everything looks polished on the outside, but in the deep, internal way that says, I value myself enough not to let my own mind harm me. That is self-respect in its most intimate, powerful form. Because think about it, your thoughts shape your experience of life. They inform your decisions, fuel your emotions, and color the way you see the world. If your mind is constantly filled with negativity, judgment, fear, or chaos, that becomes the lens through which you live. It drains your energy. It shortens your patience. It steals your ability to be present and focused and alive. And every time you surrender to that without question, you're sending a message to yourself, my peace doesn't matter. But when you start practicing mental discipline, when you begin taking command of your thoughts, what you're really doing is honoring your time, your energy, your life. Mind control isn't about rigidity. It's not about suppressing feelings or pretending hard moments don't exist. It's about treating your inner world like something sacred. It's about creating boundaries, even with yourself. It's saying, no, I'm not going to sit in self-pity for the next 3 hours. No, I'm not going to let that one negative comment consume my day. No, I'm not going to dwell in old stories that no longer serve me. That kind of awareness, that kind of care, is self-love in action. When you respect your mind, you become intentional with where your attention goes. You stop handing it over to every distraction, every drama, every fear. You stop letting other people's moods dictate your own. You stop spending your limited, precious energy ruminating on things you cannot change. You begin protecting your focus like it's your future, because it is. That's not control in the harsh sense. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's knowing that your mental energy is a currency and you don't owe it to everyone or everything. And here's the beautiful part. The more you respect your mind, the more it starts respecting you back. It becomes quieter, clearer, more stable. You notice that the inner critic gets softer. The anxiety doesn't pull you under so fast. You catch yourself before the spiral. You give yourself space to breathe, to think, to choose. And every time you make that choice, every time you pick a thought that uplifts instead of one that tears you down, you're telling yourself, I matter. My peace matters. My life is worth protecting. You begin to see your time differently, too. You don't waste it on petty arguments or endless distractions. You invest it in things that align with your purpose, your growth, your joy. You start asking, is this worth my energy? Is this thought, this worry, this conversation adding anything meaningful to my life? And if the answer is no, you walk away. not out of arrogance, but out of deep self-respect. Mind control is not about perfection. There will still be days when you struggle, moments when the fear wins, times when the old thoughts sneak back in. But the difference is, you now know how to respond. You now have tools. You now have awareness. And that awareness is everything. That's what allows you to return to yourself again and again, without shame, without guilt, just with presence. You begin to realize that controlling your mind is the foundation for everything else. For love, for leadership, for creativity, for healing. Because when your mind is clear and aligned, you show up more fully. You speak more truthfully. You create more fearlessly. You live more intentionally. It's not about becoming some emotionless robot. It's about being so rooted in your inner world that you can walk through the chaos of the outer world without losing yourself. That is power. That is freedom. That is self-respect at its highest level. And so, if you remember nothing else from what we've shared today, remember this: your mind is the throne, and you, not fear, not doubt, not anger, not distraction. You are meant to sit in that seat, not as a victim of your thoughts, but as the ruler of them. You were not created to live on autopilot, dragged around by every emotion or circumstance. You were born with the power to choose, to lead, to transform from the inside out. There is no peace more lasting than the peace that comes when you are at home within yourself. There is no strength more profound than knowing you can walk through the chaos of life without letting it take your center. That kind of control, it doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from within. And it starts the moment you decide to stop handing over your mind to everything that's loud, urgent, or fearful. Yes, the world will test you. Yes, your old habits will try to pull you back. But every single time you pause, breathe, and choose a better thought, you rise. Every time you interrupt your own spiral and say, "No, not today. I choose peace. I choose purpose. I choose clarity," you grow. And over time, that choice becomes who you are. So take that power seriously. Guard it. Respect it. Practice it. Because when you learn to control your mind, you don't just change how you think, you change how you live. And in doing so, you give the people around you permission to rise with you, to get quiet, to get clear, to come home to themselves. You want to change your life. Start here. Start within. Control your mind, and everything else will follow. Thank you.